Premier, I wonder, for 2 days in a row, the NDP has asked you about housing issues, particularly what's going on here in HRM. I know that you had mentioned yesterday that your government would have more to say on that issue. Is that to suggest that something is going to be in the budget, or is there a program announcement coming? I wonder if you could just give us a bit more information, considering particularly what some people are actually dealing with right now.
Well, there's been a number of announcements that will come out over the next period of time. We're reassessing some of the investments that we've made to look at the impact of the Durban Nail Company we've been looking for. We also have meetings coming up with both municipality and private sector to look at how do we collaborate together, work together to provide more of a more myriad of options, quite frankly, around the housing choices. As you know, we put together for young families first-time home buyers, which is allowing people to get into the housing market. But we have people who are looking for shelters overnight simply for other issues. We need to wrap services around them, whether it's addiction services or mental health. So those are the kinds of investments that we'll work with our partners to do. But yeah, we'll have more to say as we continue to build that framework partnership with our colleagues.
Your government's been working on trying to address Airbnb and its presence. Do you feel like you folks had a proper understanding of just what it was doing to the housing market, or is that only really starting to hit us?
I wouldn't say us. I would say across the country, globally, people there's a new phenomena coming in around Airbnb, so the impact, and particularly where there was no registry, you didn't know who was actually doing or not doing it. The steps that the minister has brought forward will capture those facilities who's doing what, and allow us then to do an assessment about what is the true impact of the Airbnb situation. When you look at the growth of our economy here, it's also put a tremendous amount of pressure on affordable housing. For those who were renting what they believed was an affordable unit in downtown, that have now pushed out into the outlying communities. Those rents have gone up, but they've paid them, but now we're pushing people out of those. And that's been the real domino effect that we're trying to put some support around and trying to work with the private sector to make sure that we provide some options.
And so realistically, when you're competing with the private sector and the free market, and we see something like what's happened with that motel in Dartmouth, how much realistically can the government actually do to try to mitigate or address that kind of a situation?
Well, there's options that we can do in the manner that, for example, the center plan that happens, certain height restrictions on buildings that can be increased if you provide affordable housing options. The HRM has given builders the opportunity to move out of that, but there's a fund associated with that HRM will redirect back into affordable housing. We have our own housing stock that we need to invest in, that the minister's been talking about. At the same time, how do we work with community, co-ops, others to provide other options for people to have an affordable unit? And some of our partners, quite honestly, that are out there. Edson House has done a tremendous job working with families and children and finding them proper housing who've left very difficult circumstances. So we're pulling all of that stuff together and providing what we will provide, a number of options that because there is no one solution. Like the idea that we can stop on rent control hasn't stopped the issue in other provinces. As a matter of fact, it's created a problem. And there's no one public policy that we can go and say we're going to build all of these units that's going to solve this. And this will require a multifaceted approach because everyone who finds themselves underhoused has a different reason, and that's why we need to continue to do this. I've said this many times, and I give thanks every day that my parents bought their first house shortly before my father died. My mother then had a place to keep us all. So I'm acutely aware of what happens when trauma happens to a family. Trauma happens to housing is an important part of that, and we need to continue to do all we can to provide a substantial number of options. And sometimes it's a transition of, if you're leaving a difficult place, to find a place to protect your children and yourself and then move in. And we're also funding with young people. It's hard to get into the housing market today. That's why we brought in that Housing Star program, where we're supporting young families into that marketplace.
Premier, did you get any more clarity that you were seeking when you talked to the Prime Minister last night on that conference call?
Well, everyone, it was all the premiers. It was laid out to the Prime Minister the impact this was having on our national economy and our provincial economies, the importance that we need to continue to move this products across the country, and I think people felt that the Prime Minister was listening.
Are you confident that there's going to be a resolution fairly soon, or may it fall to you to have to fill in the gaps for some of these companies that are really having to struggle right now?
We're looking at options in terms of how we get product into our province, particularly propane and others. I think the Minister spoke about it a bit on the floor, but the solution is have these blockades down and get the rail line moving is the ultimate solution. I would have liked to have had it happen yesterday, and many of the premiers laid out that to the Prime Minister. I think he understands that, and he will then have to make a decision on what approach they're going to take.
Do you think Ottawa waited too long to get involved in this? It kind of seems like they had hoped that the BC government might be able to resolve this on its own, and then it spiraled into what we have now.
Well, as I said earlier, there's actually injunctions on some of these rail blocks that it's not the federal government to enforce them. It's actually the law enforcement agency of record on that particular place to enforce them. They'll make that choice. It's been a multifaceted issue here. I mean, if you're looking what's happening in British Columbia, the biggest impact has happened outside. I mean, that blockade in Belleville is impacting an entire Atlantic region, Quebec and all through. So, we believe that injunction should be enforced. That's what the court system is there for, to win, and people receive that injunction, and it should be enforced.
Do you think Ottawa understands the full impact of this?
Oh yeah, they definitely understand the impact of this. The impact this is having on the economy, they would know firsthand from people who would have been communicating directly with them, as well as people who are communicating directly with us. I mean, CN alone, moving the goods and services, has been very vocal with the national government via rail. You look at our ports. You asked a question yesterday, and I which I think is which is an important one, is what is the lingering effect of this? When you lose a line from our port to go to the U.S., how quickly can we encourage them to come back when this is going? Those are the things that I think that are worrisome. This will get solved, but what is the lingering impact on the economy?
Brief question on the coming budget. How would you characterize this budget?
I would consider this budget a dividend to Nova Scotians who have worked really hard over the last 6 years to drive an impressive economy and economic growth and a sustainability in this province that they haven't seen before.
Sounds like you've